This is Dolynny TV, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon and welcome back to another edition of Edmonton Oilers discussion here on the channel. In fact, this is news. I don't know why I'm talking discussion. This is news. This is an update about the lineup and how things will shake out for opening night. Made official by Dave Tippett today is the fact that, well, you know what? There is a roster spot up for grabs to open up training camp. Where, you say? Well, we've kind of already discussed it a million times in the past 3 or 4 days. That spot James Neal normally occupies in the Oilers lineup. Well, according to Edmonton Oilers insider Reed Wilkins with 630 Ched, Tippett says Neal won't be ready for opening night, and that means, well, by every definition of it, there is a roster spot or two available on this Oilers team, right? If you want to say there was a roster spot on the taxi squad or 2 or 3 spots up for grabs, now there's a spot in the lineup, which means there's a spot in the 13-14 forward core, which also means there's a spot on the taxi squad. So you see how this goes, is there's now a little bit of a shift, however you want to say, and yes, necessarily those spots would already been filled by probably the guys that will fill them, but now it's kind of cement yourself in that open slot. So for, say, Joakim Nygard, who wants to be in the lineup, he now has that shot instead of being the 13th, 14th forward. Now you talk about an Alan Quine, a Jujar Kara, whoever else you want to get in there, especially don't forget Gaetan Haas is going to be in there some point, but he's not here yet. So you've got a Devon Shore, you've got a Ryan McLeod, Tyler Benson. The list goes on and 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 on. And I don't have to sit here and say all the names because we know all the names. Say Seth Griffith potentially, right? Is that guy that because now Alan Quine's moved off the taxi squad into the 13-14 forward role, you now have a spot there where Seth Griffith makes the taxi squad out of camp, right? Now you see how this all works. And with the official announcement, it's all good to go. I'm sorry, I know a couple of you guys have told me to slow down recently. I get a little excited, alright? I get a little excited, and especially after going out, it's about +3 out here in southern Alberta today where I am. Beautiful blue sky. You see on my face, that's the sun coming in from the window. That's not my light. That is the sun coming in, and that is on the north-facing window. It is beautiful out there. So my apologies, I'm a little amped up excited. Plus, we've had a very exciting day here on Dolynny TV so far. January's just been incredible so far, and I'm going to meander for a minute here and thank you guys for tuning in as much as you have, subscribing in as large numbers as you have, because it has been a fantastic treat to see the excitement really ramping up as we get towards hockey season. But you see, this for me is the exciting part about training camp, is every training camp there's always something goes wrong. And for the Oilers, it's James Neal this year not being ready to go out of camp. Now, James Neal not being ready to go out of camp, that's a $5.75 million expensive mistake. But essentially at the same time, is there's kind of implications here that maybe a lot of us aren't talking about. And that's because most of us on Twitter probably aren't fully following Puckpedia, who has been putting out just an incredible amount of source information on the Oilers' LTIR situation with Oscar Klefbom. And now the most likely situation appears to be James Neal on the IR, Gaetan Haas on the IR, and then some kind of combination to just get us to what would be a cap where we're sitting above about $4 million, right? Realistically, we can't quite sit at 4.167, but we can fit just above 4.05, I think is the number on the IR, and that would be our LTIR pool for this season if we were to activate LTIR that way, as opposed to being just close to the cap ceiling and then activating Klefbom's full LTIR money and getting that 4.12. So somewhere, somehow, some way, the Oilers, because of this James Neal injury, are going to be sitting there around an extra $4 million in cap space to operate this year. And that's, well, without having to waive or trade anyone, we potentially have solved our own problems now with James Neal being injured to start the season. And that's an interesting turn of events. It's something that's been a possibility all camp, but something that realistically doesn't need to be talked about till we get the official confirmation, which came today from Reed Wilkins right there in that tweet to tell you, yes, okay, so it's done and dusted. That is the facts. That is how it's going to play out. So now, for the Oilers, this is the situation we see in which the IR leads to the LTIR money, leads to $4 million in cap space, which leads us to be able to activate a team that we have assembled for this season. And that's solid because, right, you get, of course, Ethan Bear solidified in the lineup. You get Dominic Cahoon. You get Tyson Barrie. All these additions out of thin air, essentially, right? We were not going to be able to do this, technically speaking. But now, all of a sudden, because of Haas being on in the IR or whatever the situation realistically is with him at this point, I don't think we've had an update. I don't know if I've missed it in the Dave Tippett press conference. I was checking some stats and stuff out. But, right, is you sit here and no matter how you look at it, an unfortunate turn of events has kind of led to the perfect turn of events for the Oilers here at training camp. Is yes, right? Is we would love to see no spots up for competition. You would love to know exactly what your opening night lineup was going to look like. You would have loved. But the way this has gone is, I think, basically to look at it from my perspective and look at Dolynny TV, what I've talked about when it comes to Oilers training camp updates, what I've talked about when it comes to this or that configuration, is the fact that there's moving targets as to how this all works together is probably what's given our excitement through training camp. Simply because as you see guys go up and down in stock in the scrimmages and practices, is the fact that, well, you know what, we have no preseason games to judge by. So the lines and the line juggling are about our best kind of situation to judge a guy by right now, and to sit there and see, yeah, when I talk lines and a camp update, here's the lines today. That is the biggest video of the day for Dolynny TV. Anything else I do is small minor news compared to those lines, because that tells you what has happened during camp the day, right? And now all of a sudden we saw James Neal on the ice today, but you get Dave Tippett kind of stealing the thunder, saying, shut down any idea he's going to be ready. He will not be ready for opening day. So now we know for sure there's a roster spot up for grab. That's confirmed. Now you know how things could work. Is that roster spot maybe Seth Griffith on the taxi squad, Ryan McLeod, Tyler Benson, any number of those guys? Do you carry an extra defenseman? What do you do? Well, now it all comes down to asking that big question for Dave Tippett and Ken Holland, how they build this roster. But all the while lost in this is, of course, the LTIR and IR situation with Clefbaum, Haas, and Neal. And you just get this fun kind of combination of there's so many moving targets to keep track of. And without preseason games, that's something we could have only hoped for, and we have it. And now we sit here and look at training camp coming to a close, right? As of tomorrow, we are into the double digits of January, which means we are 3 days away from the puck dropping on opening night of the season. And my goodness, you're kidding me if we are not excited for that one. That's going to be a good time. So now, you know what? Crunch time. We talked about it in the third period of that Team Canada game against the United States in the gold medal. Crunch time, the desperation sets in. And you know what? One thing's gone awry now. Two things, maybe if you count Haas. Is there a third thing that's really going to complicate this? Or is it going to be an opening night situation where somebody goes down opening night? And remember, we don't have a lot of time to go out there and juggle the lines up and see what works. We got 56 games to be top 4 in the Canadian division. I mean, you got a 50% chance of that, I guess, technically speaking, because there's only 7 teams. But still, you got to compete, and there's going to be at least 6 teams worthy of competing all season long for those top 4 spots. So, ladies and gentlemen, the mad dash continues through this training camp. And I mean, the news, it just keeps coming and it don't stop coming. But we'll talk more. I got to listen to the rest of the Dave Tippett press conference, and I will catch you guys a little bit later on this afternoon. Thanks for listening to this James Neal update. I'm Tyson. This is Dolynny TV. I will catch you in the next one.